My name is William, and I'm 70 years old. Right now, I'm sitting on the wide porch of my white wooden house in Wilmington, North Carolina, watching the sun sink into the Atlantic like a burning coal being swallowed by dark water. The ocean breeze carries the scent of salt and pine through the screen door, mixing with the smell of coffee I brewed an hour ago and forgot to drink. These hands wrapped around this cold mug are gnarled and spotted with age, the knuckles swollen from decades of hauling nets in the prey-dawn darkness of the Gulf Stream. I built this house with these hands. Every board, every nail, every coat of white paint that makes it shine like a beacon when the morning light hits it just right. The porch wraps around 3 sides, wide enough for a dozen rocking chairs, though I only keep 2 now. One for me, and one that stays empty. That empty chair used to be Martha's, my wife. She died 11 years ago, the cancer eating through her like rust through an old boat hoe, and I still can't bring myself to sit in it. The house sits on a 1/4-acre lot, 3 blocks from the Intracoastal Waterway, close enough that I can hear the fishing boats heading out before sunrise, their engines coughing to life in the cold morning air. The live oaks in my yard are older than me, their branches draped with Spanish moss that sways in the slightest breeze. In spring, the Confederate jasmine that Martha planted climbs the porch posts, filling the air with a sweetness so thick you can almost taste it. She loved that jasmine. Said it reminded her of her grandmother's place in Charleston. I grew up poor. Not the kind of poor where you go without cable television or new shoes. The kind of poor where you eat cornmeal mush 3 times a day and consider yourself lucky. My daddy was a sharecropper down in Robeson County, working tobacco fields that belonged to a man who drove a Cadillac while we walked everywhere we went. I was the youngest of 6 kids, and by the time I came along, there wasn't much left to go around. I wore my brother's hand-me-downs until they were more patched than original fabric, and I learned early that if you wanted something in this life, you had to work for it with your own 2 hands. When I was 16, I lied about my age and got work on a commercial fishing boat out of Morehead City. The captain knew I was lying, but he needed hands and I was willing. That first season nearly killed me. The work was brutal, the hours inhuman, and the pay barely covered my room in a boarding house that smelled like mildew and cooking grease. But I learned fast. I learned to read the water, to feel the fish beneath the boat, to predict when a storm was coming by the way the air tasted. I learned to tie knots with hands so cold I couldn't feel my fingers, to work through exhaustion that made my bones ache, to push past fear when the waves rose higher than the boat's mast. By the time I was 20, I was first mate. By 25, I had saved enough to buy my own boat, a 32-foot trawler I named the Martha Ann after the girl I'd been courting for 3 years. She was a teacher's daughter from Wilmington, pretty as a spring morning, with dark hair that fell past her shoulders and a laugh that could light up a room. Her daddy didn't think much of me, a rough fisherman with calloused hands and a boat that barely stayed afloat, but Martha saw something in me. She saw what I could become. We got married in a small church on Market Street, nothing fancy, just family and a few friends. Her daddy gave her away with a look on his face like he was handing her off to certain poverty and disappointment. I promised myself that day that I would prove him wrong. I would give Martha everything she deserved and more. The fishing was good back then, in the early years. The waters off Carolina were thick with flounder, spot, croaker, and shrimp. I'd leave port at 3 in the morning, work until sunset, come home smelling like fish and diesel fuel, and Martha would have dinner waiting. She never complained about the smell or the hours or the weeks when the catch was poor and money was tight. She just kissed my cheek and told me she was proud of me. Our son Tommy came along 2 years after we married. He was born during Hurricane Hazel in 1954, right in the middle of the storm. The hospital lost power halfway through labor, and the doctors worked by flashlight and lantern while the wind screamed outside like a living thing trying to get in. When Tommy finally came into the world, red-faced and howling, I held him in my arms and felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about me and Martha anymore. This was about building something that would last beyond us, something that would give Tommy opportunities I never had. I worked harder after that. Longer hours, rougher waters, taking risks I probably shouldn't have. There were times I went out when other boats stayed in port, when the weather reports warned of gales and heavy seas. But I had a family to provide for, and sometimes providing means risking everything. I remember one time, Tommy was maybe 4 years old. I got caught in a squall 20 miles offshore. The waves were 15 feet, maybe more, and the Martha Ann was taking on water faster than I could pump it out. I honestly thought that was it, that my son would grow up without a father, that I'd broken my promise to Martha. But I made it back. I always made it back. The boat limped into port with a cracked hull and a blown engine, and it took every penny I'd saved to repair her, but I made it back. Tommy doesn't remember that. He was too young. But Martha remembered. I saw it in her eyes every time I left for a trip after that. The fear she tried to hide, the relief when I returned. We lived in a rental house then, a cramped 2-bedroom place on 3rd Street that flooded every time it rained hard. Martha made it nice with curtains she sewed herself and furniture we bought at yard sales, but I wanted more for her. I wanted to give her a house of her own, a place where she could plant flowers and paint the walls any color she wanted without asking a landlord's permission. So I started building this house. Bought the land in 1985 with money I'd saved for 5 years. Every spare dollar squirreled away in a coffee can in the back of the kitchen cabinet. The lot was cheap because it flooded during high tide, but I knew how to fix that. I spent 2 summers hauling fill dirt and building it up, load by load, until the ground was high enough. Then I started framing. I worked on the house every minute I wasn't on the boat. Weekends, evenings when the light lasted, even by floodlight some nights when I couldn't sleep. Tommy helped when he was old enough, holding boards steady while I hammered, learning to measure and cut, getting splinters and swinging at nails until his arms ached. Those were good times. The best times looking back. Just a father and son building something together, not talking much, just working side by side while the mosquitoes buzzed and the crickets sang. It took me 3 years to finish the house. 3 years of sore muscles and splinters and mistakes that had to be torn down and rebuilt. But when it was done, when I carried Martha over that threshold and saw her face light up as she walked through rooms that still smelled of fresh paint and sawdust, it was worth every blister, every aching back, every hour of sleep I'd lost. We registered the house in my name. Just mine. Martha insisted on it. She said I'd built it with my own hands and my own sweat, and it should be mine. I tried to argue, but she was stubborn when she wanted to be. So the deed says William Hayes, and only William Hayes. That was 1987. And that house has stood through hurricanes and nor'easters in summer, storms that tore shingles off roofs up and down the street. The neighbors all knew me as the old fisherman who built his own house, who could look at a cloud formation and tell you if it would rain, who always had a story about the sea. Tommy grew up in that house, did his homework at the kitchen table while Martha graded papers, learned to cook in that kitchen, brought his first girlfriend home to meet us on that porch. He was a good student, better than I ever was. He wanted to go to college, to be the first in either of our families to get a degree. North Carolina State University in Raleigh, that's where he wanted to go. The tuition was steep, more money than I'd ever imagined spending on anything. But Martha and I agreed. We'd make it work, so I worked even harder. I upgraded the boat, got better equipment, pushed further out to deeper waters where the big money catches were. I took side jobs repairing boats for other fishermen, built docks and piers on weekends, did anything that would bring in extra money. Martha took on private tutoring in the evenings, helping kids with reading and math while Tommy studied upstairs. We ate simple meals, didn't take vacations, drove cars until they literally wouldn't run anymore. Every penny went into Tommy's college fund. He got accepted to NC State in 2001. Full ride would have been nice, but he got in, and that's what mattered. I paid his tuition every semester with money I'd earned pulling nets before dawn. Money that had the smell of fish and salt water on it. I was proud to pay it. Proud that my son was getting opportunities I never dreamed of. That's when the arthritis started getting bad in my hands. The cold water, the repetitive motion of hauling nets, 40 years of it, had taken its toll. Some mornings I could barely make a fist. But I didn't complain. I just took some aspirin and got back to work. The pain was the price you paid for providing for your family, for giving your son a better life than you had. Tommy met Lisa at college. She was from Charlotte, came from money. Her daddy owned car dealerships or something like that. She was pretty in that polished way city girls are, always dressed nice, always smelled like expensive perfume. I could tell right away she wasn't used to people like us, working people who earned everything they had. But Tommy was head over heels for her, and Martha liked her well enough, so I kept my opinions to myself. They got married right after Tommy graduated in 2005. He'd gotten a job with some tech company in the Research Triangle, making more money than I'd ever seen. The wedding was at some fancy historic plantation outside Raleigh, with more guests than I could count and food I couldn't pronounce. It cost a fortune. Lisa's parents offered to pay, but Tommy insisted we split it. Said it was tradition for the bride's family to pay for the wedding, but he wanted us to contribute equally to show we were equals. I didn't have that kind of money sitting around. The boat was old, needed constant repairs, and the fishing wasn't as good as it used to be. Regulations had gotten tighter, fuel costs had gone up, and younger guys with newer boats were taking a bigger share of the catch. But this was my son's wedding, so I took out a loan against the house. Martha wasn't happy about it, but she understood. You do what you have to do for family. The wedding was beautiful. Martha cried through the whole ceremony, and even I had to wipe my eyes when Tommy and Lisa said their vows. Afterward, at the reception, Lisa's daddy made a toast about how his daughter was marrying a man with a bright future, a man who would take care of her the way she deserved. He didn't mention me or Martha or the sacrifices we'd made to get Tommy through school. That stung a little, but I let it go. It was their day. The grandson came along in 2006. They named him Ethan. I drove up to Raleigh the day he was born, walked into that hospital room and held my grandson for the first time. He was tiny, pink, with a tuft of dark hair and eyes that seemed to look right through you. Martha was there too, and she was so happy she glowed. We both did. This was our legacy, our bloodline continuing, proof that all the hard work had been worth something. But things changed after that. Tommy and Lisa got busy with their lives, with their careers and their friends and their fancy neighborhood in Raleigh. They'd come down for Christmas and maybe Easter, bring Ethan to show him off, but the visits felt rushed, obligatory. Lisa would wrinkle her nose at the smell of fish that never quite left my clothes, would make comments about how we really should update the house, put in granite countertops and stainless steel appliances like they had. Tommy would be on his phone half the time, dealing with work emails, barely listening when I tried to tell him about the fishing or the weather or anything from my world. I tried teaching Ethan to fish, taking him out on the boat when he was old enough, but Lisa didn't like it. Said the sun was too harsh, the boat was too dangerous, Ethan might fall overboard or get hurt. She wanted him doing soccer and piano lessons and all the things rich kids did. So the fishing trip stopped. Then Martha got sick. It was 2014 spring. The jasmine was in full bloom. She'd been feeling tired for months, but we both figured it was just age catching up with us. She went to the doctor for what she thought was a routine checkup and came home with a diagnosis that felt like a punch to the gut. Cancer. Stage 4. Pancreatic. The doctor said 6 months, maybe a year with treatment. We did the treatments. I sold the boat, the Martha Ann that I'd owned for 40 years. Sold it to pay for specialists and experimental therapies and medications that cost more than my first house. Tommy helped with some of the costs, but he had his own expenses. His mortgage and Lisa's boutique she wanted to open, and Ethan's private school. I understood. I didn't ask for help. I handled it myself, the way I always had. Martha lasted 8 months. Toward the end, she couldn't get out of bed. I took care of her, bathing her, feeding her, sitting with her through the long nights when the pain was too much for sleep. Hospice nurses came and went, kind women who spoke in soft voices and showed me how to give injections, how to turn her so she wouldn't get bed sores, how to recognize when the end was near. Tommy came down for the last week. He sat by her bedside, held her hand, cried when she slipped into unconsciousness. Lisa came too, but she stayed in a hotel in town, said she couldn't handle seeing Martha like that. I didn't judge her for it. Death isn't easy to witness. Martha died on a Tuesday morning in November. The sky was gray, threatening rain, and the wind was blowing in from the ocean, cold and sharp. I was holding her hand when she took her last breath, felt her squeeze my fingers one final time, and then she was gone. The hospice nurse said some comforting words I don't remember, and then Tommy and I sat there in the quiet, neither of us knowing what to say. We buried her in Oakdale Cemetery, under an oak tree, in a plot I'd bought years before when we were planning for the future. The funeral was small, just family and a few old friends. Lisa wore black and cried into a handkerchief, and Ethan looked uncomfortable in his suit, like he wasn't sure how he was supposed to act. Tommy gave a eulogy about what a wonderful mother Martha had been, how she'd sacrificed everything for him, how she'd been the glue that held our family together. It was a good speech. It made people cry, but I couldn't speak. My throat was too tight, the grief too raw. After Martha died, the house felt too big and too empty. Her clothes still hung in the closet. Her books were still on the knitstand. Her coffee mug still sat in the cabinet, waiting to be used. I couldn't bring myself to move any of it. Some nights I'd sit in her chair on the porch, just to feel close to her, and I'd talk to her like she was still there. Told her about my day, about the weather, about Tommy and Lisa and Ethan, about how much I missed her. The neighbors probably thought I'd lost my mind, the old man talking to himself on the porch. But I didn't care. Without the boat, I was just another retiree living on Social Security and the pension I'd built up over the years. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get by. The house was paid off. I didn't need much to live on. I spent my days doing yard work, fixing things around the house, walking down to the waterway to watch the boats come in. The other old fishermen would wave, ask how I was doing, share stories about the old days when the fishing was good and life was simple. Tommy called every week or so, usually on Sundays. The conversations were brief, surface level. How are you feeling? Did you eat today? Do you need anything? I always said I was fine, even when I wasn't. What was the point in complaining? He had his own life, his own problems. He didn't need to hear about an old man's aches and pains. Then about 2 years ago, something shifted. The phone calls became less frequent. The visits stopped altogether. Tommy would make excuses, work was busy. Ethan had events at school. Lisa wasn't feeling well. I understood at first. Life gets in the way. But as the months stretched on, I started to feel like maybe I was becoming a burden, an inconvenience, something to be checked off a list rather than visited because they wanted to. The last time I saw them before today was 18 months ago. Christmas 2023. They drove down for a few hours, dropped off some presents, ate the dinner I'd spent all morning cooking, and then hurried back to Raleigh because they had plans with Lisa's family the next day. The presents they gave me were generic things clearly bought last minute. A sweater that didn't fit and a book I'd never read. The whole visit felt perfunctory, like they were fulfilling an obligation. Ethan was a stranger to me by then. 15 years old, glued to his phone, barely making eye contact when I tried to talk to him. I asked him about school, about his hobbies, about anything, and got one-word answers. Tommy and Lisa didn't seem to notice or care. They were too busy talking about their jobs, their friends, their plans to remodel their kitchen. I sat there listening, realizing that I'd become background noise in their lives. An old man whose stories they'd heard too many times, whose company they endured rather than enjoyed. After they left that Christmas, I sat on the porch with a whiskey and watched the stars come out. I thought about all the years I'd worked, all the sacrifices I'd made, all the times I'd put their needs above my own. I'd paid for Tommy's education, paid for his wedding, helped with Ethan's expenses, sold my boat to pay for Martha's treatments. I'd given everything I had. And now, at 70 years old, I was alone in a house full of memories, waiting for phone calls that came less and less often. But I didn't complain. That's not what men like me do. We endure, we carry on. We find purpose in small things, in tending the yard, in fixing loose boards on the porch, in watching the seasons change. The jasmine still bloomed every spring. The oak still stood strong through summer storms, and the ocean still rolled in and out with the tides, indifferent to human troubles. I thought about Martha a lot during those quiet days. Wondered what she'd think about how things had turned out, whether she'd be disappointed in Tommy or whether she'd make excuses for him like mothers do. I talked to her chair on the porch, told her I was doing okay, that I was managing. Sometimes I could almost feel her presence, almost hear her voice telling me to stay strong, that everything would work out in the end. The house needed work, more than I could keep up with anymore. Boards needed replacing, paint was peeling. The roof had a leak I patched with tar, but really needed new shingles. My hands weren't what they used to be, the arthritis making simple tasks take twice as long. But I did what I could. This was my house, built with my own hands, and I'd maintain it with whatever strength I had left. I kept the important documents in a metal box in the bedroom closet. The deed to the house, showing clear title in my name. The insurance policy on the boat, a life insurance policy Martha and I had taken out years ago that had paid out when she died. Money I'd invested carefully. My pension papers, Social Security information, bank statements showing the accounts I'd built up over decades of careful saving. Tommy didn't know about most of it. I'd never talked much about money with him. Figured it was my business to manage. The neighbors were kind. Mrs. Patterson next door would bring over casseroles sometimes. Invite me to church suppers I never attended. Mr. Chun across the street would help me with the heavier yard work, refused payment, said that's what neighbors do. They'd known Martha, had watched Tommy grow up, and they treated me with the respect you give someone who's earned his place in the community. Life had a rhythm, even in its loneliness. Wake before dawn out of habit, even though there was no boat to catch. Coffee on the porch watching the sunrise. Work in the yard until the heat got too oppressive. Lunch, usually something simple. Afternoon nap in the recliner. More yard work or reading in the evening. Dinner, TV, bed, repeat. It wasn't exciting, but it was mine, and it was enough. I thought about selling the house sometimes. Moving into one of those retirement communities where you don't have to do your own yard work and there are scheduled activities to keep you busy. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. Too many memories in these walls. Too much of myself built into every board and nail. This was where Martha and I had built our life, where we'd raised Tommy, where we'd been happy. Leaving it would feel like abandoning her all over again. So I stayed. I maintained my dignity, kept the house as presentable as I could, lived quietly, and didn't bother anyone. The years had taught me that pride wasn't about what you owned or how much money you had. It was about knowing you'd lived honestly, worked hard, done right by your family. I could look at myself in the mirror every morning and know I'd done that. Whatever else happened, I had that. The ocean was my companion in those quiet years. When the loneliness got too heavy, I'd walk down to the beach, stand in the surf, and let the waves wash over my feet. The water was cold, even in summer, and the salt spray on my face felt clean, purifying. The ocean didn't care how old you were or how much money you had or whether your family visited. It just rolled in and out, eternal and indifferent, a reminder that life went on regardless of individual troubles. I'd watch the fishing boats go out in the mornings, feel that old pull to be out there with them, hauling nets, reading the water, doing honest work. But those days were behind me now. My body couldn't handle it anymore, and truth be told, I wasn't sure I wanted it to. There was something to be said for sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee, Watching others do the work you used to do, knowing you'd earned your rest. The evening sun was setting as I sat there remembering, the sky turning those shades of orange and pink that only happen over the ocean. The jasmine was starting to bloom, filling the air with that sweet scent Martha had loved. Spring was here, bringing with it new growth, new possibilities. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I'd face it the same way I'd faced everything else in my life, with dignity, with strength, and with the quiet pride of a man who'd earned every gray hair and every wrinkle through honest labor. Tomorrow would bring what it would bring. Tonight, I'd sit on my porch in the house I built, breathing in jasmine and salt air, grateful for what I had and at peace with what I'd lost. That was enough. It had to be enough. The call came on a Wednesday morning in April. I was in the yard, trying to prune back the azaleas that had gotten overgrown, when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer, figured it was probably a telemarketer or someone trying to sell me something I didn't need. But the number looked familiar, so I wiped the dirt off my hands and picked up. "Dad?" Tommy's voice sounded strange, tense in a way I couldn't quite place. "Hey, son. Everything all right?" There was a pause, long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Then he said, "Yeah, everything's fine. Listen, I need to talk to you about something. Can Lisa and I come down this weekend?" My heart lifted at that. It had been so long since they'd visited. "Of course. I'll make up the guest room, cook us a nice dinner. What time should I expect you?" "Actually, Dad, we need to come Saturday. And we need to talk about some things. Important things." Something in his tone made my stomach tighten. "What kind of things?" "We'll discuss it when we see you. Gotta run. Work is crazy right now. See you Saturday." He hung up before I could ask any more questions. I stood there in the yard with my phone in my hand, that uneasy feeling settling in my chest like a weight. Important things. What kind of important things required a visit, but couldn't be discussed over the phone? I spent the rest of the week cleaning the house from top to bottom, wanting everything to be perfect for their visit. I scrubbed floors, washed windows, changed sheets on the guest bed, went to the grocery store and bought ingredients for Tommy's favorite meal, pot roast with potatoes and carrots, the way Martha used to make it. I even went out to the garden center and bought some fresh flowers for the dining table. Mrs. Patterson noticed all the activity. She came over Friday afternoon with a pound cake she'd baked. "Having company, William?" she asked, her kind eyes crinkling with a smile. "My son and daughter-in-law are coming tomorrow. Haven't seen them in a while." "Oh, how wonderful. I'm sure they'll be so impressed with how nice you keep the place." I thanked her for the cake and went back inside, but her words stuck with me. Impressed. Why would they need to be impressed? This was my house, the house I'd built. They knew how I kept it. Saturday morning arrived with that thick, humid heat that Carolina springs are known for. The air was heavy with moisture, the sky a milky white threatening thunderstorms later. I was up before dawn as usual, too nervous to sleep. I made coffee, checked the pot roast in the slow cooker for the third time, straightened the pillows on the couch that didn't need straightening. They pulled up around 2 in the afternoon, driving a brand new SUV that gleamed in the hazy sunlight. It was one of those luxury models, probably cost more than I'd made in 5 years of fishing. Tommy got out first, dressed in khakis and a polo shirt that looked expensive, sunglasses hiding his eyes. Lisa emerged from the passenger side, wearing designer jeans and a silk blouse, her highlighted hair pulled back in a ponytail. Ethan slouched out of the back seat, earbuds in, eyes on his phone. I came out onto the porch, wiping my hands on my jeans, a smile on my face despite the knot in my stomach. "Hey there. Good to see you all." Tommy gave me a brief hug, the kind of hug you give someone out of obligation rather than affection. Lisa air kissed my cheek, her perfume so strong it made my eyes water. Ethan didn't even look up from his phone. "Ethan, say hello to your grandfather," Lisa said, her voice sharp. He mumbled something that might have been hello and shuffled past me into the house. "He's at that age," Tommy said with a shrug, like that explained everything. You know how teenagers are. I didn't really. Tommy had never been that rude when he was that age, but I kept that thought to myself. Come on in. I've got coffee and Mrs. Patterson brought over a pound cake. We went inside, and I saw Lisa's eyes scanning the place, taking in the worn furniture, the outdated fixtures, the general wear that comes with a house that's nearly 40 years old. Her nose wrinkled slightly, like she smelled something unpleasant. You really should update this place, William, she said, settling herself on the couch like she was trying not to touch too much of it. These old houses can be such money pits. It suits me just fine, I said, pouring coffee. I built it solid. Good bones. Still, granite countertops wouldn't hurt. And those appliances must be ancient. I bit back the retort that rose to my lips. Martha's voice in my head reminded me to be gracious, to remember they were guests. So what brings you all the way down here? Must be important to drive 3 hours. Tommy and Lisa exchanged a glance, one of those married couple looks that says they've discussed something extensively. Tommy cleared his throat. Dad, we need to talk about your living situation. My coffee cup paused halfway to my lips. My living situation? What about it? Well, you're 70 years old. You're living alone in this big house, and we worry about you. Worry about me? I'm doing fine. I take care of myself just fine. Lisa leaned forward, her expression what she probably thought was sympathetic. William, we know you think you're fine, but accidents happen. What if you fall? What if something happens and there's no one here to help? I've got neighbors. Mrs. Patterson checks on me regular. That's not the same as having professional care, Tommy said. Dad, Lisa and I have been talking, and we think it might be time for you to consider moving into a retirement community. Somewhere with nurses on staff, where you'd have people your own age to socialize with. The bottom dropped out of my stomach. A retirement home. They wanted to put me in a retirement home. I don't need a retirement home. I'm not some invalid who can't take care of himself. No one's saying you're invalid, Tommy said quickly. But let's be realistic. This house is too much for you to maintain. Look at the yard. It's getting overgrown. The porch needs painting. The roof is leaking. I can see water stains on the ceiling there. I followed his pointing finger and saw the stain I'd been meaning to fix, the one from last winter's ice storm. Shame heated my face. I'm working on that. I've got projects lined up, just haven't gotten to everything yet. That's exactly our point, Lisa said. It's too much house for one person your age. And honestly, William, you're not getting any younger. It's only going to get harder. Ethan wandered through the room, still on his phone, barely glancing at us. The disrespect of it, the complete disregard for the fact that we were having a serious conversation, made my jaw tighten. I appreciate your concern, I said, trying to keep my voice level. But this is my home. I built it with my own 2 hands. I'm not leaving it. Dad, be reasonable, Tommy said, and there was an edge of frustration in his voice now. We've actually found a really nice place in Myrtle Beach. It's got activities, meals included, housekeeping. You wouldn't have to worry about anything. I don't want someone else cooking my meals or cleaning my house. I can do those things myself. But for how much longer? Lisa asked. Tommy and I have talked about this a lot, and we really think this is the best option. The sooner you make the transition, the easier it will be. Something about the way she said it, like it was already decided, like my opinion didn't matter, made anger flare in my chest. The best option for who? For me or for you? The room went quiet. Tommy's jaw clenched, and Lisa sat back like I'd slapped her. That's not fair, Dad, Tommy said. We're trying to help you. Help me, or get me out of the way. Maybe make it easier for you not to have to worry about checking on me, not to have to drive down here. You know what? Tommy stood up, his face flushing. Maybe if you weren't so stubborn and set in your ways, this would be easier. We're trying to do what's best for you, but you won't even consider it. What's best for me is staying in my own home, living my own life. Your own life? Lisa laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. William, let's be honest. What life do you have here? You sit on this porch all day, You don't go anywhere or do anything. At least in a community, you'd have activities, people to talk to. I don't need activities planned by someone else. And I've got people to talk to. Mrs. Patterson doesn't count, Tommy said. Dad, I know this is hard, but you need to trust us on this. We're your family, and this is my house, my home. Where your mother and I raised you, where we built our life together. You really expect me to just walk away from that? Mom's gone, Tommy said, and his voice was gentler now, but somehow that made it worse. She's been gone for years. You can't live in the past forever. The words hit like a physical blow. The grief I'd been holding at bay rose up, thick in my throat, hot behind my eyes. But I wouldn't cry in front of them. I wouldn't give them that. I think you should go, I said quietly. Dad, come on. Don't be like this. I said I think you should go. I need some time to think. They didn't move at first, and I thought Tommy might push it, might try to continue the argument. But Lisa touched his arm, and he nodded. Fine, we'll go. But Dad, we're not giving up on this. We'll give you some time, but we need you to seriously consider what we've said. They gathered their things. Ethan never even took out his earbuds, just followed his parents out like he couldn't wait to leave. I stood on the porch and watched them drive away, that expensive SUV kicking up dust from my driveway, and felt more alone than I had since Martha died. The pot roast sat in the slow cooker, filling the house with smells of home and family dinners that would never happen. I turned it off and went to sit on the porch, in my chair, looking out at the yard I'd maintained for nearly 4 decades. Mrs. Patterson came over later that evening, probably having seen the car leave much sooner than expected. Everything okay, William? I wanted to tell her, wanted to unload all the hurt and anger and confusion, but pride kept my mouth shut. Just fine. They had to get back earlier than expected. She didn't believe me, I could tell. But she just patted my shoulder and told me to call if I needed anything. After she left, I sat in the gathering darkness and thought about what Tommy had said. Was he right? Was I being stubborn? Was this house really too much for me? I looked at the peeling paint on the porch railing, the sagging gutter I'd been meaning to fix, the overgrown azaleas that needed more work than I'd been able to give them. Maybe they had a point. Maybe I was holding on to something I shouldn't, living in the past with Martha's ghost. But then I looked through the screen door at the living room we'd furnished together, at the kitchen where Martha had cooked thousands of meals, at the stairs Tommy had climbed every day of his childhood. This wasn't just a house. It was a lifetime of memories, of love, of sacrifice. How could they expect me to just walk away from that? I thought about calling Tommy back, trying to explain, trying to make him understand. But what would I say? That his old man was too sentimental to be practical? That I'd rather die in this house than spend my last years in some sterile facility playing bingo with strangers? The phone rang later that night. I almost didn't answer, but some part of me hoped it was Tommy calling to apologize, to say they'd been too harsh. It was Lisa. William, I want to apologize for today. I know we came on a bit strong. A bit strong. That was one way to put it. It's all right. I know you mean well. We do. Tommy and I love you, and we just want what's best for you. And honestly, William, we're worried. You're isolated out there. You don't take care of yourself the way you should. We just think you'd be better off somewhere with support. I appreciate the concern, but I'm managing just fine. Are you though? Tommy said the place looked run down. And when's the last time you had a proper meal? Not just heating up soup or making a sandwich, but a real meal. I cook for myself plenty. William, her voice took on that tone, the one she used when talking to Ethan when he was being difficult. You need to think about this seriously. We're not trying to be mean. We're trying to help. And frankly, it would give us peace of mind knowing you were somewhere safe. Peace of mind for them. That's what it came down to. Not what was best for me, but what made things easier for them. I'll think about it, I said, because I wanted to get off the phone. Wanted to end this conversation that made me feel small and incapable. Good. That's all we ask. Just think about it. We'll call you next week to talk more. After I hung up, I poured myself a whiskey, something I didn't do often anymore. I sat on the porch with that drink and watched the stars come out, listened to the night sounds of frogs and crickets and the distant rumble of waves. The next few weeks were strange. Tommy called regularly, which should have been nice, except every call came with gentle pressure about the retirement home. He'd casually mention how nice the facility was, how much I'd enjoy the activities, how much easier my life would be. Lisa would get on the phone and talk about how they'd help me pack, how they'd make sure I got a nice room with a view. I stopped answering every time they called. Let it go to voicemail. Listen to their messages later when I could steel myself for the guilt trip they'd inevitably lay on me. The house started to feel different, like it was watching me, waiting to see if I'd betray it. I found myself apologizing to the walls sometimes, telling them I wouldn't abandon them, that I'd never leave. Mrs. Patterson probably would have worried if she'd heard me talking to the house, but I didn't care. I tried harder to keep up with maintenance. Painted the porch railing, even though my hands ached something fierce. Fixed the leaking gutter, nearly fell off the ladder doing it. Tackled the azaleas with a determination that left me exhausted and sore for days. Every repair was a promise to this place that I wouldn't give up on it, but I couldn't stop the slow decline. Couldn't stop the arthritis from getting worse. Couldn't stop the fatigue that made simple tasks take twice as long. Couldn't stop time from doing what time does to old men and old houses. Tommy and Lisa came down again in May, unannounced this time. I was napping in the recliner when I heard the car pull up. Hadn't been sleeping well, up most nights with aching joints and racing thoughts, so I dozed off in the afternoon heat. They let themselves in, Lisa using a key I didn't remember giving her. I woke to find them standing in my living room, looking around with expressions I couldn't quite read. "Dad, we need to talk," Tommy said. "We've been patient, but we need to make a decision about this." I rubbed the sleep from my eyes, feeling vulnerable being caught napping, feeling ambushed in my own home. About what? About you moving. We've been talking about this for months now, and you keep putting it off. But Dad, we can't wait forever. We need to know you're safe. I am safe. Right here in my own home. Lisa sat down on the couch, and there was something in her posture, a determination that made my stomach sink. "William, we've made the deposit on the retirement home. You have a room reserved starting June 1st. The words hit like ice water. "You what?" "We made the arrangements," Tommy said. "It's a really nice place, Dad. We went and toured it ourselves. You'll have your own room, 3 meals a day, activities every afternoon. There's even a library and a garden area. You had no right to do that without asking me." "We did ask you," Lisa said, "multiple times. You just refused to listen. Because I don't want to go. This is my home. Dad, please." Tommy's voice was strained. "Don't make this harder than it has to be. We're doing this because we love you. If you loved me, you'd respect my wishes." "Your wishes aren't practical," Lisa said, and there was less patience in her voice now. "You can't take care of this place anymore. Look around, William. Really look. The house is falling apart, and so are you." The cruelty of those words, the casual way she said them, made something snap inside me. "Get out." "Dad," I said, "get out. This is my house and I want you out of it." Tommy's face went red. "Fine. Be stubborn. But Dad, we're not backing down on this. One way or another, you're moving to that facility. We've already paid for it. Then you wasted your money because I'm not going anywhere." They left, and this time there was no pretense of civility, no gentle goodbyes. Just anger and slammed doors and the roar of that expensive SUV peeling out of my driveway. I stood in my living room, shaking with rage and hurt and fear. They'd made a deposit. They'd planned this without me, assuming they could just override my decisions, treat me like a child who didn't know what was best for himself. That night I couldn't sleep at all. I sat on the porch with the metal box of documents I kept in the closet, looking through papers by flashlight. The deed to the house, the insurance policies, the bank statements, proof of everything I'd built, everything I'd earned. They thought I had nothing. Thought I was just a poor old fisherman they needed to take care of. Thought they could make decisions for me because I didn't matter anymore. But they were wrong. And I realized then that this wasn't going to end with me peacefully giving in. This was going to end one of two ways. Either I'd stand up for myself, prove I wasn't helpless, or I'd let them bulldoze me into a life I didn't want. The anger turned to determination as the sun came up. I might be 70 years old. I might have aching joints and slowing reflexes. But I'd survived 40 years of commercial fishing, survived hurricanes and rough seas and back-breaking work. I'd provided for my family, built a life from nothing, earned every single thing I had. And I'd be damned if I let them take that away from me now. The afternoon was thick with humidity when they came back, the kind of heat that makes your shirt stick to your back and turns the air into something you have to push through. It was mid-May, the jasmine in full bloom, the scent of it heavy and almost cloying in the stillness before a storm. The weather forecast had been calling for severe thunderstorms all week, and you could feel it in the atmosphere, that pressure building, waiting to break. I was on the porch, going through some old fishing gear I'd been meaning to organize, when I heard the SUV pull into the driveway. My stomach dropped. I hadn't heard from Tommy or Lisa in 3 weeks, not since our last fight, and their sudden appearance filled me with dread. But it wasn't just them this time. When Tommy got out of the driver's seat, he went straight to the back and started pulling out boxes, moving boxes. Cardboard containers stacked in the cargo area, packing tape, markers. Lisa emerged wearing jeans and a t-shirt, her hair pulled back, looking dressed for work rather than a visit. And Ethan. He got out of the back seat, earbuds in as always, looking supremely bored with the whole situation. What's all this? I stood up from my chair, my heart starting to pound. Tommy didn't even look at me as he hauled a stack of boxes up onto the porch. We're here to help you pack, Dad. Pack? I never agreed to move anywhere. Dad, we talked about this. Tommy finally met my eyes, and there was something hard in his expression, something I'd never seen directed at me before. June 1st is 2 weeks away. The room is reserved and paid for. You're moving whether you like it or not. The hell I am. This is my house, Tommy. You can't just force me out. Lisa came up the steps, barely glancing at me. William, we've been patient with you, but enough is enough. You can't take care of yourself here. You won't do it voluntarily, so we're doing it for you. She walked past me into my house. My home, like she owned the place. Like I wasn't even there. You can't do this, I said, but my voice came out weaker than I intended. You have no right. We have every right, Lisa called from inside. You're not competent to make these decisions anymore. Someone has to be the adult here, not competent. The words hit like a slap. I followed her inside, where she was already opening cabinets in the kitchen, starting to pull out dishes. Don't touch those. Those were Martha's. They're just dishes, William. You won't need them where you're going. Meals are provided. She wrapped a plate in newspaper with efficient movements, like she'd done this 100 times before. We'll donate most of this stuff. No point hauling it all to storage. Storage? You're putting my things in storage? We'll keep some of it, Tommy said from the doorway. The important stuff. But Dad, you've got 40 years of junk in this house. You don't need all of it. Junk. He called a lifetime of memories junk. I felt something break inside me, some final restraint that had been holding back the rage and hurt and betrayal. Get out. Get out of my house right now. No, Dad. Tommy's voice was firm. We're not leaving until this is done. You should probably go sit outside. Let us handle this. It'll be easier that way. Easier? You think any of this is easy? You think I'm just going to sit on the porch while you pack up my life? Yes, actually, that's exactly what you're going to do. Lisa came back through with another box of dishes. Because frankly, William, you don't have a choice. This house is too much for you. You're not taking care of yourself, and we're not going to watch you deteriorate here all alone. I'm not alone. I've got neighbors. You've got no one, Lisa said, and her voice was sharp now, cutting. You've got a neighbor lady who brings you casseroles out of pity, and a bunch of other old people who are as decrepit as you are. You need real care, professional care, and that's what you're going to get. Tommy was moving through the living room now, looking at furniture with a critical eye. This couch is shot. We'll have to throw it out. Dad, where do you keep your important papers? Birth certificate, social security card, that kind of thing. I'm not telling you anything. Stop going through my stuff. But he ignored me, headed for the bedroom. I tried to follow, but my legs felt weak. My heart was pounding too hard. This couldn't be happening. This was my home, my life, my things. Ethan finally took out his earbuds and looked around with vague interest. This place really is a dump, he said casually. I don't blame you guys for wanting to get him out of here. The words came from my own grandson. The boy I'd held as a baby. The boy I'd tried to teach to fish and surf and appreciate the simple beauty of the ocean. And he looked at me like I was nothing, like I was garbage to be removed. Ethan, that's enough, Tommy called from the bedroom, but there was no real reproach in his voice. Just going through the motions of correction. Lisa was in the kitchen, systematically emptying drawers and cabinets. Martha's good china, the set we'd gotten for our wedding, the cast iron skillet I'd cooked 1,000 meals in, the coffee maker that still worked perfectly fine. All of it being packed away or set aside for donation like it meant nothing. Where's Martha's jewelry? Lisa called out. She had some nice pieces. Those should probably go to us. You can't have her jewelry. That's for who? Not for me. I'd never wear it. I'd been planning to give it to Tommy eventually, for Lisa or maybe for Ethan's future wife someday. But now I wanted to bury it in the yard rather than let Lisa's grasping hands touch it. William, be reasonable. What are you going to do with women's jewelry? We'll take care of it. Tommy came back carrying my metal box, the one with the documents. Found it. This should have everything we need. Put that down. Those are my private papers. Dad, we need these to get you registered at the facility. Just let us handle it. He set the box on the dining table and started going through it. I lunged forward, tried to grab it, but he held it out of reach easily. The casual way he did it, like keeping things from a child, made the humiliation burn even hotter. Stop treating me like I'm incompetent. I built this house with my own hands. I raised you. I paid for your education, your wedding, everything you have, and this is how you repay me. Tommy looked up from the documents, and for just a moment, I saw something that might have been guilt flash across his face. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. Dad, if you'd taken care of yourself, if you'd maintained this place, if you'd agreed to move voluntarily, we wouldn't have to do it this way. You forced our hand. I forced nothing. You're doing this because it's convenient for you. Because you don't want to be bothered checking on me. Because you want to sell this house and take the money. The room went silent. Lisa stopped packing. Ethan looked up from his phone. Tommy's face went red. That's what you think? His voice was dangerously quiet. You think we want your money? What else am I supposed to think? You show up here with boxes and start packing up my life without my consent. You talk about putting me in a home like I'm a piece of furniture you need to store. We're trying to help you. Tommy shouted, and I'd never heard him yell like that before. Jesus Christ, Dad, why can't you see that? You're 70 years old. You can barely take care of yourself. This house is falling apart around you, and you're too stubborn and too proud to admit you need help. I don't need this kind of help. I don't need you to pack up my life and ship me off somewhere I don't want to go. What you need and what you want aren't the same thing. Lisa joined in now. Grow up, William. You're acting like a child. Grow up, she told me to grow up. Me, who'd worked since I was 16, who'd built a business and a house and a family. Me, who'd earned every calloused hand and gray hair through honest labor. She told me to grow up. Get out, I said, and my voice was shaking but firm. Get out of my house, all of you. No. Tommy squared his shoulders. We're not leaving. And actually, Dad, we need to talk about something else. He pulled a document from my metal box, unfolded it. The deed to the house. This house is in your name. Just yours. Did you know that when you die, it goes through probate? Could take years. Could cost tens of thousands in legal fees. Lisa and I have been thinking, maybe it would be better if you signed the house over to me now. Transfer the deed. That way when the time comes, it'll be easier for everyone. The world seemed to tilt. You want me to give you my house. Not give, transfer, for legal purposes. You'd still live here until the move, but it would make everything simpler down the road. You want me to sign over the house I built, the house your mother and I raised you in. So you can what? Sell it the minute I'm in that facility? We're not going to sell it right away, Lisa said. But William, be realistic. You're not coming back here. Once you move to the retirement home, that's it. So we might as well have the house in our names, make it easier to handle. I stared at them, these people I'd sacrificed everything for. My son, who I'd put through college working jobs that destroyed my body. His wife, whose wedding I'd mortgaged my house to pay for. My grandson, who couldn't even be bothered to look up from his phone while they dismantled my life. And I realized in that moment that they didn't love me. Maybe they never had. I'd been useful to them, a source of money and support and free labor. But now that I was old, now that I couldn't provide anymore, I was just a burden to be managed, an inconvenience to be dealt with. You think I'm worthless, I said quietly. You think I'm just some old man with nothing to offer, nothing to contribute. Someone you can push around and make decisions for because I don't matter anymore. Dad, that's not. Don't. I held up my hand. Don't lie to me, not now. I see exactly what this is. You want my house, you want my things. You want me out of the way so you can live your lives without having to worry about the old man, who's past his usefulness. You're being dramatic, Lisa said. We're trying to help you. Help me? You want to lock me up in a facility and take everything I've worked for. You call that help? What else would you call it? Tommy's patience was clearly wearing thin. You don't work, you don't contribute anything. You just sit on this porch all day living in the past. At least in the retirement home you have purpose, activities, something to do besides mope around missing Mom. The words were like physical blows. Each one struck deeper than the last. I don't contribute anything. Just sit around. Mope. Is that really what you think of me? My voice came out broken, all the anger draining away into something worse. Something that felt like grief. Dad, I didn't mean. Tommy started, but Lisa cut him off. Yes, William, that's what we think. You've become a burden. There, I said it. Someone had to. You're a burden on us, worrying about you, having to drive down here to check on you, dealing with your stubbornness. We have our own lives, our own responsibilities. We can't keep dropping everything to take care of you. I never asked you to take care of me. You didn't have to ask. You're family. But William, there's a limit to what we can do. And you've reached it. So yes, we're moving you to the retirement home, and yes, we're taking the house. And that's just how it's going to be. She turned back to her packing, dismissing me, done with the conversation. Tommy avoided my eyes, focusing on the documents in his hands. Ethan had his earbuds back in, swaying slightly to whatever music drowned out his grandfather's humiliation. I stood there in the middle of my living room, surrounded by boxes and strangers who wore familiar faces. The life I'd built was being dismantled around me, packed away or thrown out, deemed worthless by the people I'd sacrificed everything for. Martha's voice whispered in my memory, "This should be yours. You built it. It's in your name, my name, just my name. The house, the insurance policies, the pension, the savings accounts. All in my name. Everything I'd earned and saved and protected, thinking I was building a legacy for my family. But they didn't want a legacy. They wanted an inheritance. And they wanted it now, while they could enjoy it, rather than waiting for nature to take its course. Something crystallized in that moment. Something cold and hard and clear. I'd been planning to give them everything eventually anyway. The house, the money, all of it. I'd been planning to die knowing I'd left my family provided for, knowing my sacrifices had meant something. But not like this. Not with them treating me like garbage, like a burden to be disposed of. Not with them taking everything while I was still alive to see it, still able to understand exactly how little I meant to them. Not like this. I turned and walked out of the house. Behind me, I heard Tommy call out, "Dad, where are you going?" But I didn't answer. I walked down the porch steps, across the yard to where Tommy's expensive SUV sat in my driveway, packed full of boxes meant to contain my life. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking, but I managed to unlock it, to pull up my email. I'd been forwarded the details of that retirement facility they'd chosen for me, the one they'd put a deposit on without my knowledge or consent. I found the email and read through it. Then I called the facility. "Hi, yes, this is William Hayes. I understand my son made a reservation for me. Yes, that's right. I'm calling to cancel it. Effective immediately. No, I won't be needing the room after all. Yes, I understand about the deposit. He'll have to work that out with you." I hung up and walked back into the house. They were still packing, still going through my things like vultures picking over a carcass. I went to the dining table where Tommy had set my metal box. "I need that," I said. Tommy looked up, surprised. "Dad, we're going through it right now. We'll give it back when we're done." "No, I need it now." Something in my voice must have registered because he hesitated, then handed it over. I took it, held it close to my chest like it was the most precious thing in the world. Which, in that moment, it was. I called the retirement home, I said. Canceled my reservation. They all stopped, turned to look at me. "You what?" Lisa's voice was sharp. "I canceled it." "I'm not going." "Dad, you can't do that," Tommy said. "We already paid. You paid without my consent. That's your problem, not mine. I'm not going to that facility. I'm not signing over my house. I'm not letting you pack up my life and throw it away." "William, don't be ridiculous," Lisa said. "You don't have a choice." "Actually, I do. This is my house, my name on the deed. My property. And I'm telling you to leave, now." "We're not leaving," Tommy said. "Dad, you're clearly not thinking straight. Maybe you need to see a doctor, get evaluated for what? Dementia? Incompetence?" I laughed, a bitter sound. "You'd love that, wouldn't you? Get me declared incompetent, take over everything. Well, I've got news for you, son. I'm as sharp as I ever was. Sharp enough to see exactly what you're doing here." "And what's that?" Lisa's arms were crossed now, her expression hostile. "Using me, taking from me. Treating me like I'm nothing because you think I have nothing to fight back with. You don't have anything." Ethan spoke up, his teenage voice dripping with contempt. "You're just an old man who smells like fish and lives in this dump. We're doing you a favor." The words hit exactly as he'd intended them to. My own grandson, looking at me like I was trash, like I was less than nothing, like all the years of work and sacrifice and love meant absolutely nothing. I looked at each of them in turn. Tommy, who wouldn't meet my eyes. Lisa, with her hard, greedy expression. Ethan, with his casual cruelty. And I made my decision. "You're right," I said quietly. "I don't have anything. Nothing but this house and whatever money a old fisherman managed to scrape together. Probably not worth your time, really." I saw relief flicker across Tommy's face. He thought I was giving in, surrendering. "That's more like it, Dad. Now, if you'll just sign these papers." "No." The word hung in the air like thunder before a storm. "No?" Tommy's face was starting to redden again. "Dad, we've been through this." I said no. And I mean it. You want to know why? Because you're right. I do smell like fish. I did spend my whole life doing manual labor that real people like you look down on. I did build this house with these hands, these old, rough hands that embarrass you in front of your fancy friends. I held up my calloused, arthritic hands, made them look at them. These hands pulled nets in storms that would have killed softer men. These hands built this house board by board. These hands worked double shifts and took side jobs to pay for your education, Tommy. To pay for your wedding. To give you everything you have. Dad, I'm not finished. These hands held your mother when she was dying, bathed her, fed her, gave her medicine in the middle of the night when the pain was too much. These hands sold my boat, the only thing I had left of my working life, to pay for treatments that might give us a few more months together. And these hands will hold on to what's mine until the day I die. You're being unreasonable. Lisa's voice was shrill now. You're a stubborn old man who can't see what's good for him. Maybe I am. But I'm a stubborn old man who still has his name on the deed to this house. Who still has control of his bank accounts. Who still gets to make his own decisions. And I'm deciding that you need to leave. Now. Get out of my house. Fine. Tommy threw the papers down on the table. Fine. You want to rot in this falling down house all alone? You want to die by yourself with no one to help you? That's your choice. But don't come crying to us when you fall and break your hip, or when you can't remember where you are, or when this place finally falls down around your ears. I won't, I said. I wouldn't give you the satisfaction. Lisa was already heading for the door, her face twisted with anger. You're going to regret this, William. When you're lying in a hospital bed with no one to visit you, you're going to remember this day and regret it. The only thing I regret, I said, is wasting my life trying to give you a better one. The words seemed to freeze them all in place. Even Ethan looked up from his phone, something like shock on his young face. Then Tommy grabbed his car keys. Let's go. He's not worth it. Not worth it. My son said I wasn't worth it. They filed out, leaving the boxes they'd started packing, leaving the mess they'd made of my living room. The SUV roared to life, and they were gone in a spray of gravel and dust. I stood in the doorway watching them leave, my heart hammering, adrenaline making my hands shake. What had I done? Had I just cut off my only family? Was I going to die alone, like Lisa said, with no one to help me? Maybe, but at least I'd die with my dignity intact. At least I'd die in my own home, surrounded by memories of the woman I loved, in a place I built with my own hands. I went back inside and started unpacking the boxes they'd filled, putting Martha's dishes back in the cabinets where they belonged, hanging her pictures back on the walls. It took me hours, and my hands ached, but I did it. Every item put back was an act of defiance, a statement that this was still my home, my life, my choice. When everything was back in its place, I made myself dinner. Just scrambled eggs and toast, nothing fancy. But I made it myself, in my own kitchen, ate it at my own table. Small victories, but they mattered. That night I sat on the porch with the metal box beside me, watching the storm finally break. Lightning forked across the sky, thunder rolled across the water, and rain poured down in sheets that drummed on the roof and overflowed the gutters. But the house stood firm, the way it had stood firm through hurricanes and nor'easters and all the storms of 4 decades. I'd weathered this storm too. But I knew it wasn't over. Tommy and Lisa wouldn't give up that easily. They'd be back, with lawyers maybe, or doctors to evaluate me. They'd fight for what they thought they were owed. Let them come. I'd faced worse than lawyers. I'd faced the ocean itself and lived to tell the tale. The rain washed away the dust from the driveway, cleaned the porch, made everything fresh and new. Tomorrow would bring what it would bring. Tonight I was home, I was free, and I was more alone than I'd ever been in my life. But sometimes being alone is better than being with people who make you feel worthless. Sometimes dignity matters more than company. Sometimes you have to stand up for yourself, even if it means standing alone. I finished my whiskey and went inside, locked the doors, and went to bed in the room where Martha had died, where we'd slept together for 40 years. The storm raged outside, but inside I was strangely peaceful. I'd made my stand. I'd defended what was mine. Whatever happened next, at least I could say that. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as powerless as they'd thought. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Tommy's face, heard Lisa's cruel words, felt the weight of Ethan's contempt. The rain hammered against the windows. Wind rattled the shutters, and I lay there staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. But when dawn broke, gray and wet through the clearing storm, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Clarity. The kind of clarity that comes from cutting away everything false and seeing what's really there. They thought I had nothing. They thought I was a burden, a has-been, an old man whose usefulness had expired. They'd come into my house, into the home I'd built, and treated me like I was already dead, like my wishes and my feelings and my whole life didn't matter. And I'd almost let them do it. I got up, made coffee, sat at the kitchen table with my metal box. Inside were all the documents I'd carefully saved and protected over decades. Birth certificate, marriage license, Martha's death certificate that I still couldn't look at without pain, Tommy's birth certificate, my honorable discharge from 2 years of mandatory service in the Merchant Marine, the deed to the house. I pulled it out, unfolded the yellowed paper, looked at the official stamp and signature from 1987, William Hayes, owner. No one else's name on it, just mine. Martha had insisted, said I'd earned it. I'd argued at the time, said we should put both our names, but she'd been adamant. You built it, honey. It's yours, she'd known. Even then, she'd known to protect me, protect what I'd worked for. Like she could see into the future, see this moment coming. I looked at the other documents. The life insurance policy Martha had taken out on both of us back in the 90s. When she died, it had paid out $250,000. I'd invested most of it conservatively, lived off my pension and Social Security, let that money grow. Tommy didn't know about it. I'd never told him. It was going to be his inheritance someday. Money to make his life easier, to give Ethan opportunities. But they didn't know. They assumed I was poor, that I had nothing but this falling down house and some old fishing equipment. There was the boat insurance, too. The Martha Ann had been insured for replacement value, and when I'd sold it to pay for Martha's treatments, the insurance company had paid me the difference between what I got in the sale and what the policy said it was worth. Another $100,000 I'd invested, never touched, saving it for ... for what? For a family that saw me as a burden? My pension was small but steady. Social Security wasn't much, but it covered my basic expenses. And I'd been saving, scraping together every spare dollar for 40 years. The accounts had grown more than I'd expected, thanks to some good advice from a financial planner Martha had insisted I see back in the 80s. I did the math in my head. The house was worth at least $300,000, probably more in this market. The investments totaled another $400,000. The savings accounts, the pension, the Social Security. All told, I was looking at close to $750,000. Not rich by Lisa's standards maybe, but not the pauper they thought I was. And every bit of it was in my name. Just mine. No joint accounts, no shared ownership, nothing they could touch without my permission. They'd tried to bully me into signing it over, tried to make me feel worthless and helpless, so I'd just give up and give them what they wanted. And it had almost worked. I thought about Tommy growing up in this house. Thought about all the times I'd helped him with homework, taught him to tie his shoes, to ride a bike, to bait a hook. Thought about the nights I'd worked late repairing other people's boats so I could save money for his college fund. Thought about missing his baseball games because I was out on the water earning money to pay for the house he grew up in. I thought about Lisa, who I'd welcomed into the family even though I could see she looked down on us, on our simple lives and working-class values. I'd paid for half that expensive wedding, gone into debt for it, because Tommy loved her and I wanted him to be happy. I thought about Ethan, who I'd held as a newborn, who I'd tried so hard to bond with despite Lisa's interference. The grandson who couldn't even be bothered to look at me, who called my home a dump, who had absorbed his parents' contempt and reflected it back at me. And I thought about Martha, my beautiful Martha, who'd stood by me through everything, who'd never complained about the hard years, who'd made our little rental house a home, who'd insisted I put the new house in just my name because she wanted to protect me. What would she think of Tommy now, of what he'd become, of how he'd treated his father? I made myself breakfast, real breakfast, eggs and bacon and toast, not just the coffee and cereal I'd been living on. I needed my strength for what was coming, because I knew they'd be back. Maybe not today, but soon. They'd try again, with different tactics. Lawyers maybe, or a doctor who'd evaluate my competency. They'd fight for what they thought they were owed. But I had something they didn't expect. I had proof. Proof that I wasn't some helpless old man, that I had resources, that I had control over my own life. And I had something else too, nothing left to lose. The rain had stopped, leaving everything clean and dripping. I went out on the porch with my coffee and looked at the yard. The storm had knocked down some branches, scattered debris across the lawn. The gutter I'd fixed was holding, no leaks. The house had weathered another storm, the way it always did. Mrs. Patterson came over mid-morning, concerned look on her face. "William, I saw them here yesterday." "Tommy and Lisa," I heard shouting. "Is everything okay?" I considered lying, keeping it private like I usually did. But I was tired of hiding, tired of pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. They wanted me to move to a retirement home. Wanted me to sign over the house to them. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, William. That's terrible. What did you do?" I told them no. Sent them packing. "Good for you." Her eyes flashed with indignation. "This is your home. They have no right. They think they do. Think I can't take care of myself anymore, that I'm a burden. That's nonsense. You take care of this place better than people half your age. You're out here working every day. There's nothing wrong with you." Her words warmed something inside me that had gone cold. "Thank you, Eleanor. That means a lot. You let me know if they come back and cause trouble. My son's a lawyer, you know. He'd be happy to talk to you if you need advice." I filed that information away. A lawyer might be useful if it came to that. I appreciate it. "Really, I do." She patted my arm and headed back to her house, but the concern didn't leave her face. I wondered what the neighbors had seen and heard yesterday, what they thought about the man next door and his ungrateful family. The afternoon stretched long and quiet. I worked in the yard, clearing storm debris, checking for damage. Physical labor helped calm my mind, gave me something to focus on besides the anger and hurt that kept threatening to overwhelm me. My phone rang around 4. "Tommy." I stared at it, debating whether to answer, then hit the decline button. It rang again immediately. I declined again. Then a text message. "Dad, we need to talk. Please call me back." I set the phone on the table and went back to work. It rang 3 more times that evening. I didn't answer. There was nothing to talk about. They'd made their position clear. They wanted me gone, wanted my house, wanted to control my life. And I'd made my position clear too. No. But the calls kept coming. Tommy, Lisa, even a number I didn't recognize that might have been their lawyer. I let them all go to voicemail, didn't listen to the messages. Whatever they had to say, I didn't want to hear it. 3 days passed. 3 days of silence from me, of constant calls from them. 3 days of working in the yard, making repairs, proving to myself that I could still take care of things. 3 days of sitting on the porch in the evening, remembering the good times with Martha before everything got complicated. Then on the 4th day, they showed up again. I was on the porch when the SUV pulled up. My heart started pounding, but I stayed seated, kept my face neutral. Let them come to me this time. Tommy got out alone. No Lisa, no Ethan. He looked tired, older somehow, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. "Hey, Dad." His voice was subdued. "Tommy, can we talk?" "That depends. You planning to try to pack up my house again?" He winced. "No, I just want to talk." "Please?" I gestured to Martha's empty chair. He climbed the steps slowly, sat down. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The cicadas were starting their evening song, the air heavy with the promise of more rain. "I'm sorry," he said finally, "for how we handled things. For what we said. It was wrong." I didn't respond, just waited. "Lisa and I have been talking. We realize we came on too strong, that we didn't consider your feelings. We were so focused on what we thought was best that we didn't stop to think about what you wanted. You thought I was helpless," I said. "Thought you could just make decisions for me. Yes, and that was wrong. Dad, I know you're capable of taking care of yourself. I know this house means everything to you. I shouldn't have tried to force you to leave it. The apology sounded genuine, but I was wary. What changed? He was quiet for a moment, then said, Lisa's father called me. Apparently Mrs. Patterson's son contacted him, said if we kept harassing you, they'd help you file a restraining order. And then I started thinking about what we'd done, how we'd treated you, and I was ashamed. Good. He should be ashamed. We were thinking about the deposit we lost on the retirement home, and the money we'd spent planning the move, and we were angry. But Dad, the money doesn't matter. What matters is that we hurt you. We made you feel worthless when you're the strongest person I know. The words were nice, but words were easy. So what now? Now I leave you alone. Let you live your life the way you want. No more pushing, no more trying to force you into decisions you don't want to make. And Lisa? She's embarrassed about what she said. She wants to apologize too, but she's afraid you won't want to see her. He wasn't wrong about that. And Ethan? Tommy's face darkened. Ethan is grounded for the foreseeable future. What he said to you was unacceptable. We've had some serious conversations about respect and family. I nodded slowly. It was something at least. Dad, I know I can't undo what we did. I know saying sorry doesn't fix it. But I want you to know that I love you. I always have. We got caught up in worry, and it turned into something ugly. It turned us into something ugly. You tried to take my home, Tommy. Tried to take everything I've worked for. I know. And I'll regret that for the rest of my life. We sat in silence again. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Martha's favorite time of day. She'd sit out here with me, and we'd watch the colors change, not talking, just being together. I'm not signing over this house, I said finally. Not now, not ever. It's mine, and when I die, you'll inherit it the regular way. Through the will I've had drawn up for 20 years. I understand. And Dad, I don't want your house. Not like that. I have my own home. What I want is my father back. The relationship we used to have before everything got complicated. That's going to take time, son. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight. I know. I'm willing to put in the time if you are. I looked at him, this man who used to be my little boy. I saw genuine remorse in his eyes, genuine regret. But I also remembered how easily he'd dismissed me, how quickly he'd been willing to throw me away. We'll see, I said. Start by not calling for a while. Give me some space to think. Okay, I can do that. He stood to leave, hesitated. Dad, one more thing. The money you spent on my education, on my wedding, all the sacrifices you made. I want you to know I appreciate it. I didn't say it then, but I appreciated it. I owe you everything I am. You don't owe me anything. That's what fathers do. We provide for our children, even when those children treat them like garbage. Even then. Though I'll admit, you tested that principle pretty hard. He laughed, a short, bitter sound. Yeah, I did. After he left, I sat on the porch until full dark. The conversation replayed in my mind, his words, his tone, trying to assess whether it was genuine or just another manipulation. But deep down, I thought it was real. I thought he meant it. Whether that was enough remained to be seen. I went inside and opened my metal box again, looked at all the documents that represented a lifetime of work. They thought I had nothing, that I was nothing. But these papers told a different story. They told the story of a man who'd built something, who'd earned something, who had value regardless of what anyone else thought. I pulled out the will I'd mentioned to Tommy, the one I'd had drawn up years ago. It was simple, straightforward. Everything to Tommy when I died. The house, the money, all of it. That's what I'd always intended. But sitting there looking at it, I wondered if that was still what I wanted. Did Tommy deserve it, after what he'd done? Did I want my life's work going to someone who'd so easily thrown me away? I didn't have an answer, not yet. The next morning, I called Mrs. Patterson's son, the lawyer. His name was David, and he sounded professional but friendly when he answered. My mother told me what happened. I'm sorry you had to go through that. Thank you. Listen, I need some advice. Legal advice, of course. What can I help you with? I explained the situation, the attempted forced move, the demand that I sign over the house. I told him about the documents in my metal box, about the money they didn't know about. First thing, David said, make sure all your documents are in order. Will, power of attorney, healthcare directives. Everything clearly stating your wishes. If they try to have you declared incompetent, you need that documentation showing you were of sound mind when you made these decisions. I'll do that. Second, consider setting up a trust. Put the house and the major assets into a trust with clear instructions about what happens to them. It protects them from probate, from being contested, from people trying to manipulate you into changing things. Would that mean Tommy couldn't inherit? Not at all. You can name him as the beneficiary. But it adds a layer of protection, makes it much harder for anyone to force you to sign things over or claim you were incompetent. When you made the decisions, we talked for another 30 minutes, and by the end of the call, I had a plan. I'd meet with David next week, get everything properly documented and protected. I'd make sure that no matter what happened, no one could take what I built. That evening, sitting on the porch with a glass of whiskey, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Not happiness, not yet. The hurt was still too fresh for that. But peace, knowing I'd stood up for myself, knowing I'd protected what mattered. The ocean breeze carried the scent of salt and jasmine, and for a moment I could almost feel Martha sitting next to me, could almost hear her voice telling me she was proud. I did it, honey, I said to the empty chair. I stood my ground. The chair didn't answer, of course, but the jasmine bloomed a little brighter in the porch light, and I chose to take that as her approval. 3 months passed before I heard from Tommy again. 3 months of quiet days and peaceful nights, of getting the legal documents in order, of slowly repairing the damage to my heart, if not to our relationship. David helped me set up the trust exactly as he'd described. The house, the investments, all of it protected now, clearly documented, with instructions that couldn't be challenged or manipulated. Tommy was still the beneficiary, I hadn't changed that. But now there were safeguards, protections against the kind of pressure they'd tried to apply. I also updated my healthcare directive, made it explicitly clear that I wanted to remain in my home for as long as possible, that any decisions about my care needed to respect my autonomy and wishes. David warned me it wouldn't stop a determined family from trying to override it, but it would make it much harder. The house stopped feeling like a burden during those months. Instead, it became a sanctuary again, the way it had been when Martha was alive. I fixed things as they needed fixing, not frantically trying to prove something, just maintaining my home the way I always had. The roof got its new shingles. The peeling paint got touched up. The overgrown azaleas got properly trimmed. Mrs. Patterson and her husband had me over for dinner a few times. Other neighbors stopped by to check on me, invited me to a 4th of July barbecue where I actually had fun, swapping fishing stories with some other retired watermen. I realized I'd been isolating myself without meaning to, letting grief and loneliness turn me into a hermit. I started going to the docks again in the mornings, watching the boats go out, talking to the younger fishermen about their catches and the changes in the industry. Some of them knew who I was, had heard stories about the Martha Ann and the crazy old captain who'd go out in weather that kept everyone else in port. They treated me with respect, asked my advice about reading the water and predicting storms. It felt good to be valued for my knowledge and experience, rather than dismissed as a burden. I even started volunteering with a program that taught at-risk kids about maritime trades. Once a week I'd go down to the community center and talk to teenagers about fishing, about boat maintenance, about making an honest living from the sea. Some of them listened, some didn't, but I enjoyed it. It gave me purpose beyond just maintaining the house. The jasmine bloomed and faded. Summer heat gave way to the first hints of fall, and I found myself actually content in a way I hadn't been since before Martha died. The loneliness was still there, especially in the evenings, but it was a bearable loneliness now, not the crushing isolation I'd felt before. Then in late August, Tommy called. "Hey, Dad." His voice was hesitant. "Tommy, I know you said to give you space, and I have. But I wanted to check in, see how you're doing." "I'm fine. Doing well, actually." "That's good. That's really good." A pause. "Dad, would it be okay if I came down to visit?" "Just me, not Lisa or Ethan. I'd like to see you if you'll let me." I thought about it. 3 months ago, I would have said no immediately, the hurt still too raw. But time had softened the edges of it, and curiosity outweighed caution. "All right. Come down this weekend." Saturday afternoon. "Thank you, Dad. Really, thank you." Saturday arrived with clear skies and a pleasant breeze. I'd made pulled pork in the slow cooker, Tommy's favorite, and even baked a cherry pie using Martha's recipe. If we were going to try to rebuild, might as well do it over good food. Tommy arrived alone as promised, driving an older sedan instead of the luxury SUV. He looked different, softer somehow, less polished. He'd grown a beard, and there were more gray hairs mixed in with the brown. "Hey, Dad." He gave me a careful hug like he was afraid I'd push him away. "Come on in. Got dinner ready." We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped him with his homework 30 years ago, where Martha and I had eaten thousands of meals together. For a while we just ate, not talking much, the silence comfortable in a way it hadn't been in years. Finally, Tommy set down his fork and looked at me. "I know I apologized before, but I don't think I really understood what we'd done to you. I've been thinking about it these past 3 months, really thinking, and I'm ashamed of the man I became." "What changed?" I asked. "What made you really think about it?" "I found some of Mom's old letters. She kept journals, did you know that? Lisa found them when we were cleaning out the attic, and I started reading them. I hadn't known. Martha had never mentioned journals. She wrote about you, about your relationship, about how hard you worked to provide for us. She wrote about the sacrifices you made, the risks you took, the times you went without so I could have more. And she wrote about how proud she was of you, how much she loved you." His voice cracked on the last words. Reading those letters, seeing our family through her eyes, it made me realize what I'd almost thrown away, what I'd almost destroyed. Mom would have been so disappointed in me. She would have, I agreed. But she would have forgiven you eventually. That's who she was. "Can you forgive me, Dad?" I looked at my son, this man who'd hurt me so deeply, but who seemed genuinely remorseful. Could I forgive him? Did I want to? "I'm working on it," I said honestly. "It's not something that happens all at once. But I want to get there. That's more than I deserve, probably. But that's what family is. We forgive each other things we don't deserve to be forgiven for." We talked for hours after that, really talked in a way we hadn't in years. He told me about problems in his marriage, how Lisa's materialism had been driving them apart, how the incident with me had brought things to a head. They were in counseling now, trying to figure out if they could make it work. He told me about Ethan, how his son had been struggling in school, hanging with a bad crowd, how the grounding had actually been good for him, forced him to spend time with his family and reevaluate his priorities. And he listened when I talked about the last few months, about the legal protections I'd put in place, about the volunteering I'd been doing, about the peace I'd found in my daily routines. "I'm glad you're doing well, Dad. I'm glad you stood up for yourself. You taught me something important that day." "What's that?" "That dignity matters more than convenience. That you can't let people run over you, even people you love. Maybe especially people you love. Your mother tried to teach me that for years. Took me a long time to learn it." As the sun started to set, Tommy helped me clean up the kitchen, and we went out to the porch. He sat in Martha's chair, and for the first time since she died, it felt right having someone there. "This is a good house, Dad. You built something solid here. I'm sorry I didn't appreciate that before. It's just boards and nails." "No, it's not. It's a home. There's a difference." We watched the sky change colors, and I felt something shift between us. Not back to how it was, we couldn't go back. But forward to something new, something that acknowledged the hurt but chose to move past it. I'm not leaving this house, I said. Not until I die or until I genuinely can't take care of myself anymore. And I mean genuinely, not just you and Lisa deciding I can't. I know, and I'm not asking you to. This is your home, Dad. It should stay yours as long as you want it. When I die, it'll be yours. The house, the money, all of it. It's in a trust now, protected, but you're the beneficiary. That hasn't changed. Dad, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. But that's what I want. You're my son. You made mistakes, but so did I raising you. We're human. We mess up. But you're still my son, and I still love you. He wiped his eyes, not trying to hide the tears. I love you too, Dad, and I'm going to do better. I'm going to be the son you deserve. Just be yourself, Tommy. That's all I ever wanted. He stayed until late. And when he left, we hugged for real this time. Not the obligatory embrace from before, but a genuine father-son hug that said more than words could. The next few months brought gradual healing. Tommy came down once a month, sometimes more. Sometimes Lisa came too, quieter now, more respectful. She apologized in her own way, helping me organize things in the house, bringing groceries without being asked, actually listening when I talked about Martha or the old fishing days. Ethan came with them once, awkward and uncomfortable at first. But I took him out to the docks, showed him the boats, introduced him to some of the young fishermen. He was interested despite himself, asked questions about the work, the lifestyle. By the end of the day, he'd apologized for what he'd said, his teenage pride making it clumsy, but his sincerity clear. I won't pretend it all went back to normal, because it didn't. There was a wariness between us now, a knowledge of how bad things could get. But there was also understanding, hard-won and painful, about respect and boundaries and the importance of honoring each other's autonomy. The holidays came. They invited me to their place for Thanksgiving, but I invited them here instead. And we cooked in Martha's kitchen, set the table with her good china, gave thanks in the home where our family had started. On Christmas Eve, sitting on the porch while Tommy and Ethan strung lights, I felt Martha's presence more strongly than I had since she died. Not sad, not painful, just there, like she was pleased with how things had turned out. "We made it, honey," I whispered to the empty chair that wasn't quite empty. We made it through. The lights came on bright against the December darkness, and inside I could hear Lisa laughing at something, Tommy's deeper voice joining in. My family, flawed and complicated, but mine. I thought about that day in May when they'd shown up with boxes, ready to pack up my life. Thought about the anger and hurt and humiliation. Thought about how close I'd come to just giving in, to letting them bulldoze me because it was easier than fighting. But I'd fought. I'd stood up for myself. I'd proved that I wasn't helpless, wasn't worthless, wasn't ready to be put out to pasture like an old horse that couldn't pull its weight anymore. And in fighting for myself, I'd taught them something. Taught Tommy about respect and dignity. Taught Lisa that not everything could be bought or managed. Taught Ethan that old people weren't disposable, that they had value and wisdom and worth. The ocean breeze carried the scent of pine now instead of jasmine, but the house stood firm, the lights glowed warm, and inside was family. Not perfect, but real. Not what it used to be, but maybe something better because it was built on honesty instead of assumptions. I was 70 years old, sitting on the porch of the house I'd built with my own hands, surrounded by the life I'd created through decades of hard work and sacrifice. My body was older, my hands more gnarled, my hair completely gray. But my spirit was stronger than it had been in years, because I'd learned something in those dark months, that the tide always returns, that storms pass, that what you build solid can withstand almost anything, that dignity isn't something someone gives you, it's something you claim for yourself and defend when necessary. Tommy came out to join me, handed me a mug of hot cider. "Thanks for hosting, Dad, this means a lot. This is home. Home is where family gathers, even when family screws up royally." Especially then. That's when you need home most. We stood there in the cold December air, looking out at the darkness beyond the porch lights, and I thought about the young man I'd been, working my first season on that fishing boat, dreaming of a better life. I thought about meeting Martha, building this house, raising Tommy, all the years of struggle and joy and routine. I thought about the documents in my metal box, the protections I'd put in place, the proof that I had value regardless of what anyone thought. They'd tried to make me feel worthless, and instead they'd reminded me of my worth. You know what the funny thing is? I said, when you all showed up that day, when you tried to take everything, I really did feel like I had nothing. Like I was nothing. Dad, I'm so sorry. Let me finish. I felt like nothing, like you were right to push me around. But then I remembered what I'd built, what I'd earned, what I'd survived. And I realized that my worth wasn't dependent on whether you recognized it. It was there regardless, in these walls, in those documents, in the life I'd lived. You're right. And we should have seen that from the start. You see it now. That's what matters. Inside, Lisa called that dinner was ready. We went in together, and I looked around at the home Martha and I had built, now filled with 3 generations of family. It wasn't perfect. The furniture was old, the fixtures outdated, the walls showing their age. But it was solid. It was real. It was mine. And that was worth more than all the retirement homes and fancy furnishings in the world. After dinner, after they'd all gone home promising to return for New Year's, I sat alone on the porch one more time. The metal box sat beside me. Those precious documents that had saved me from being swept away by other people's plans for my life. I opened it and looked at the deed one more time. William Hayes, it said. Owner, builder, survivor. Tomorrow I'd wake up early out of habit, make my coffee, watch the sunrise. I'd work in the yard if the weather was good, maybe go down to the docks to check on the young fishermen. I'd volunteer at the community center, sharing what I knew with kids who might listen. I'd maintain this house the way I always had, with pride and care and the understanding that it represented more than just shelter. I'd live my life the way I chose to live it, in the home I'd built, with the dignity I'd fought for and the peace I'd earned. The ocean breeze whispered through the pines, and somewhere out in the darkness, the Atlantic rolled eternal, indifferent to human dramas, but somehow comforting in its constancy. The tide went out and the tide came in, predictable and sure, and I was still here to witness it. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything.